Hello, BookTube. This is my reaction to the round one results for the BookTube prize. The results were released a few hours ago, and now I can talk about my group and my opinions about my group. So I have been a judge for nonfiction. My group for round one is Group E. The books in the group are The Yellow House by Sarah M. Broom, Me by Elton John, Charged by Emily Bazelon, The Great Pretender by Susanah Cahalan, Sea People by Christina Thompson, and I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum. So I'm honestly surprised with the results. My bottom pick, my number 6, the worst or my least, the one I like the least, the one that I ranked at the bottom is The Great Pretender by Susanah Cahalan. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I thought it was structurally a mess. That she could have focused a bit more on the main subject, the case of David Rosenhan, and whether or not his paradigm shifting study was, whether it actually happened or was faked. Like more attention on that, really the sort of, I guess, somewhat true crime reporting aspects of that case, rather than kind of some of the history of the medical profession, of psychiatry, of her own experiences. It just too much. It needed like a sharper focus. My number 5, which I thought had the same problem, though to a lesser degree, is Charged by Emily Bazelon. I mean, it was good, but I thought structurally, it could have been maybe a bit better worked, and I think maybe less going off on tangents at certain points. My number 4 was I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum. On the whole, I really like this one, especially her essays on, or her profiles of Kenya Burris, Jinji, Cahalan, and Ryan Murphy. And also her essay where she comes to terms with liking the work of bad men, and maybe not necessarily coming to a really strong sort of conclusion at that. Although I think there were some essays and pieces that were rather weak, and like, for all of your love of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you really should have just done an essay on that, and not necessarily inserting her where she really doesn't need to be. So those were the bottom 3. So my number 3 is Sea People by Christina Thompson. I thought the book was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Nothing really wrong with it. I really had no criticism. of it, except for maybe sort of maybe not necessarily focusing as much as she should have on like contemporary Polynesians and sort of how they do their own story. But I think besides that, it was a phenomenal book. So that leads me to 1 and 2, which conveniently, I guess, came down between either The Yellow House and Me by Elton John. So I read Me by Elton John first, and I thought it was by far the strongest of the 5 books I had read up to that point. It is phenomenal. Elton John, even though not necessarily the best writer or really trained as a writer, I mean, he only essentially graduated from a high school equivalent. But it's just, there's this raw power and take no prisoners and warts and all that I found captivating and just incredibly powerful. But then I read The Yellow House as the last of the books, and the writing is phenomenal. I absolutely love the writing, and I think she is by far the best writer out of all of the 6 books I read. But then we get to the destruction of the Yellow House and the aftermath. The Broom family is scattered across the country, and Sarah is a bit set adrift in a way. And then she begins to focus more heavily on her career. She does a year in Burundi working for a pro-democracy radio station, and then she goes to work for Mayor Nagin as a speechwriter, and then her career, she kind of sort of doesn't quite mention what she does after she leaves Nagin's office. But just, I think with those that point, I mean, obviously the Burundi chapter really could be its own book eventually. It just sort of what was a excellent memoir, maybe even a perfect memoir, just started to really not collapse necessarily, but just, I don't know, those chapters and the chapters that succeeded don't quite have that same power, that same vision that the earlier chapters do. But again, I ended up, so it was a struggle to determine between these two which ones would be my 1 and 2. Eventually, I decided that The Yellow House by Sarah and Broom would be number 2. So this one was the second best. Largely because of the later chapters that I don't think work quite as well as the earlier parts of the book. And then my number 1 is Me by Elton John. Obviously, in the results, The Yellow House went through. It continues on to the next round. Sea People by Christina Thompson continued on and charged. Went on to round 2. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I would be curious to see what the other judges on this group thought about it. I'm like, But anyway, so that was my group. I was going to do a video reviews and release them shortly after this video. Unfortunately, I decided not to do that. My review of Sea People is probably, if it were released, would go down in history as the absolute worst review ever. It is terrible. I struggle to criticize it. And it just was like maybe 3 minutes of me floundering trying to review it. Reviewing a book, or book reviewing, is not necessarily the form of literary criticism that I'm best at. So I may not like do film reviews after this. So I'm probably not going to like film reviews of the individual books. I'll just talk about them in this wrap-up video, or like the next one. I'm a judge for round 2. I'll talk about those obviously when I get around to reading them. I will, if I have physical copies, I will say this is for the BookTube prize, and as such I cannot say whether I like it or not until the results are announced. So yeah, so I'm a judge for round 2, which, given the current pandemic, might be a bit of a struggle. There's a shelter-in-place order, and the libraries are closed, but they are doing like a curbside where you can request books. They'll get them ready, and then basically they'll text you that they're ready. You go to a library, pick them up, or go call the library. They'll bring them out, and I'm not entirely sure how they check them out though. I guess they probably may not need library cards to check them out. And then I'm assuming if you're taking them back, you can just put them in the return slot. Even though, given that there is like a shelter-in-place order, yeah. Anyway, none of the books have e-books like from the libraries. So if I did go to the library, they would have to be physical copies. Not entirely sure if I can get a ride up there to get the books if I went with the library. So I'll think of either like buying them either through Amazon or used through a Libris, or I might try out Amazon Unlimited and get the books that way. Oh yeah. So I'm excited to see read the next 6 books, and I will talk to you again. Well, obviously I'll have another video up tomorrow, but as far as BookTube prize goes, I will see you in 2 months. Until then, BookTube, have a great day and stay safe.